and it's hard too. I think when we lose sight of those things, a lot of times is when things are tough, right? Like when you have a lot on your plate, when you have numbers that are like falling and not your business isn't doing well, or, you've got high turnover and things like that. The last thing you're focused on is your people because you're so stressed out about everything else. But that's when you have to double down and just really love on your people and spend more time with them.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Rebase Show, the show for a profession with purpose. And today we're going to talk about a common problem space that we see in the workplace. And I'm going to bring on an individual here in a second, a young woman who's going to really help me to dive into this topic of manager and direct report employee relationships and communication and how to make that better, as well as a lot of other career development topics. And real quick, before we dive into that conversation, I want to remind you, if you haven't already joined the Profession with Purpose community, the free group, 100% free on Facebook, then I got to ask, why are you trying to discover this profession with purpose on your own? Why are you trying to create more success, more fulfillment in your career as a solo endeavor? It doesn't make any sense. Nobody ever achieves anything of any great importance on their own. And I used to be the kind of person that would think that I would just make it on my own, my own effort, right? And when I look back now, I realize that there are a lot of people who helped me out along the way. A lot of people who gave me advice, gave me guidance, answered questions for me, gave me opportunities. And that is the kind of thing that you can find inside the Profession with Purpose community. So go to Facebook and do a search for Profession with Purpose, and you'll find that group. Or just, follow the link here in the description for this episode, and you'll find it right there. And so that said, you better come and join us in the community or I will come and find you. But with that said, today my guest is Mindy. With that said, today my guest is Mindy Mercurio. Mouthful, easy for me to say. And she's here to talk with us about a number of different topics, one of which is really near and dear to me, which is how to be a better manager and how to be a better employee and develop a better relationship with your manager and with your leadership. Mindy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. And thanks for having me. Totally okay. Everybody butchers my last name. It's only been my name for about 5 years. So I've gotten used to the whole, what's the last name? Ma'am, you with the face, come on over. And I'm like, yep, that's me. You're trying to say it. I got it.
I'm going to blame it on the alliteration. That's what did it for me, Mindy Mercurio. And yeah, it was just jumble in my mouth. It worked in my brain though. But thank you for being here with us today.
Yeah.
So you, when we spoke for the first time, not too long ago, I was really drawn to your experience in sales management, something which I have absolutely no exposure to really. You were in sales management for over 15 years in a variety of industries. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background professionally, and then how it came to be today where you are now a personal development coach for people who are looking to grow in their careers and in their lives. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually completely stumbled into sales and sales management when I was young. So this is back in, let's take it back to 2008. If you know or remember anything about 2008, we had a fantastic economic crisis occur. And there was a lot of change in administration. There was some change in some laws around student loans. And at the time, I was working in the student loan industry as a customer service representative. And I got laid off. And so I had a group of friends that I spent a lot of time with, and they were in sales. And they said, hey, Mindy, you should come try this out. You like to talk. You talk too much. Come hang out with us. And anytime they ever talked about their jobs, they talked about going and talking to people and trying to get them to sign up for insurance. And I was like, ooh, I don't know. That's not my thing. I'm not, sales is not for me. I'm going to pass. That just sounds not no. So eventually it got to the point that I applied for jobs because we were in a recession. There was no jobs available. So I was like, whatever, I'm going to take a chance. I'll go do this insurance thing. Found out that I was actually good at sales. And I quickly moved into sales management, which I had no idea I had any passion for management either. Again, kind of just stumbled into this
I feel
stuff.
like most people don't. Nobody, is playing with action figures as a kid and says, I cannot wait to grow up and manage people.
Yeah, right. I cannot wait to boss people around. Although I guess like life should have showed me that that's like what I wanted, because I had a brother that I bossed around all the time. I used to tell everybody I wanted to be president. So maybe this whole leader thing has been inside me my whole life.
To be clear, bossing people around is not what we're going to talk about today. And it's not what Mindy's passionate about, but continue. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's fine. Bossing people around is definitely not what we're talking about. So anyways, I stumbled into management and found that I was really enjoying helping people and helping people progress in their careers. And so I started off I was terrible. I was terrible to work for because I had no idea what I was doing. I would come in and I'd be like, why are your numbers so terrible? Why are you not doing what you're supposed to be doing? Why are you showing up to work tired? Why are you late? I focused on everything that my team was doing wrong. And I never focused on anything that they did right. And so what eventually started happening was my team really started to tank, and they didn't want to work for me. I was having a lot of turnover, and I was like, what in the world? I don't understand. Like,
what is wrong with these people? Right.
Right. What is wrong with these people? It wasn't what Mindy's doing wrong. It's what's wrong with these people. So I would go and I will never forget this. I would go in my boss's office every day and I would say, Sean, I am so frustrated. My boss's name was Sean. Sean, I'm so frustrated. These people are driving me nuts. I tell them what they're supposed to be doing. They're not doing it. And he's like, what do you know about the people who work for you? And I was like, oh, well, so-and-so's worked here this long. So-and-so drives a, Prius. I see him in the parking lot. This person hangs out in the smoke pit all the time, whatever. He's like, no, what do you know about them as people? And I was like, nothing. And he's like, okay, that's your problem. You need to go figure out who they are as people and get to know them. And so I did. So I started learning more about my team and kind of building a relationship with them. And then the internet is such a wonderful place. I saw this graphic, and this graphic, it's you may have seen it before. It's like a comic strip basically, and on the top there's like a boss, and he's sitting behind a chair, like a desk, and it's like really high up on top of a hill, and there's a bunch of people, and they're pulling a boulder, and he's like cracking the whip, basically like move faster, move harder, do better. And then on the bottom was the same like setup, except for the boss is in the front of the line of people helping them pull the boulder. Mm-hmm. And that kind of just made me realize leadership is more than just telling people what to do and handling payroll and like showing up to work and telling people what they're doing wrong. Leadership is doing the work beside your team, understanding them as people, realizing that they have life outside of work, and really actually caring. And so that's what kept me in management. So I moved around a couple different companies, stayed in management for about 15 years. And then I started to realize something else. And that realization was the fact that I couldn't be an effective coach inside of a corporation. Hang on. Let's back this up.
Okay.
So I had this realization that I had more to give than what I could give inside of corporate America. Sure. And I wanted to have deeper connections with people and help them solve all of what's going on in their life instead of just small snippets, right? Because I didn't have the time with the amount of team that I had, the amount of responsibility that I had to really help people dig into what's going on in their life and figure out where they need to go from where they're at, right? And make a transition out of whatever they're struggling with, whether they're stuck, whether they're overwhelmed, whether they're overburdened, they're struggling with communicating, they're struggling with setting boundaries. That's the stuff that I really loved about my day. And like the other stuff, like showing up for Zoom meetings and doing time cards and, writing people up, unfortunately, when I had to, was not the stuff that I loved. It in fact, just broke my heart.
The administrative and logistical and disciplinary things. Yeah.
Exactly. So when I got laid off back in December, I had already been doing some coaching on the side. I was helping a couple of different people career wise make some career moves. And I said, you know what? I'm going to take what I love doing every single day and leading with heart and leading with integrity and really caring about people and loving on people. And I'm going to do it full time. And so that's where I am today. So I started my business full time back in December. And now I get to help people every single day, which is what I'm super passionate about. And none of the administrative stuff goes along with it anymore, except for my own. Because when you're an entrepreneur, you know how it is.
Worst boss I've ever had. And I'll tell you what.
Hardest on yourself.
Exactly. Head janitor and CEO. It's crazy. So much in there I'd love to dive into and pick apart. First of all, I think that for anybody who is in a leadership or management position who feels like you don't have enough time to really dig in deep with your employees, sometimes like that is a natural feeling. I think that Mindy can attest to, and I will attest to, that sometimes you just don't get to go as deep with people depending on how many direct reports you have or how big your team is. And that doesn't necessarily mean you should quit or take advantage of a layoff or become an independent coach. It just means that is a feeling you will feel. And there are a bunch of ways to potentially deal with that. And I think we'll talk about some of those even in here. The other thing that you mentioned is being heart-led and leading from your heart and genuinely caring about people. And I'm going to ask you maybe a silly question. It might even be a silly question for our audience. You talk about genuinely caring about the people that work for you, not just the people you're coaching and who are paying you, but the people who, are your employees they're on your team. Why does that matter? Genuinely caring about the people that work for you. And again, it sounds crass, it sounds cold, but tell me the reasons why I, as an employer, or even I as a manager, should place focus on something like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it may come off as crass or cold, but a lot of times we are told with the best intentions, don't get too close to your employees, don't spend too much time with them, don't get too connected, A, to protect yourself, but B, like to, protect the company, whatever it may be. But honestly, what happens when you create that connection and you truly care about an employee is they want to work harder for you, right? So like if you're having a productivity issue, for example, you may want to look and see if you have a good connection with your team. Like people work harder for people that they know care about them. Think about a time in your life where you've had a boss who really was like not just your boss, but your mentor, right? You probably would have gone above and beyond for this person and done anything and everything you could. I know I have. I've had bosses that I had a boss one time. In fact, she was one of the best mentors I've ever had, but she got really sick and she was having to miss a lot of work because of that. And she was missing deadlines because of that. And she was very stressed out. I walked in her office one day, she's actually crying. I'd never seen her cry before. She's tough as nails. Like literally she scared me sometimes. But she was crying and all I wanted to do, because I knew she cared about me and she'd invested in me, was do anything I could to make her life easier. So I would just said, Heather, what can I do? What can I take from you? How can I help you? And I did more work on top of my own work. And I made sure I did a really good job on my work so she didn't have to worry about it. So to answer your question, caring about your people should be one of your number one priorities, because A, like it's what good humans do. Right? Like be a good human. But B, it really impacts them as a person. It impacts their work. It impacts their productivity. It impacts their day. Like we spend how many hours of our life at work? Like you should be working to make that interaction for that person the best that they could possibly have.
Spend more time with people that we work with than the people in our families. So at least for most of us. Yeah, I like I said, I know it's kind of a leading question, but a lot of business owners, business leaders will lose sight of or forget that there is bottom line impact to caring about your people. And, conversation I was just having, talking about the cost of turnover. You mentioned you had high turnover at a previous position and you're like, what is wrong with these people? Those are my words, not yours, but why are these people leaving? Now I have to hire more people. Like, what the hell? Why would they do this to me? Right. And instead, if you care about your people, the good people stick around. The people who need some help will get that help, and maybe they'll improve, and they could knock it out of the park and be some of your best people. So there are benefits to, when we first spoke, you mentioned treating employees as people instead of just as, the numbers.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. And it's hard too. I think when we lose sight of those things, a lot of times is when things are tough, right? Like when you have a lot on your plate, when you have numbers that are like falling and not your business isn't doing well, where you've got high turnover and things like that. The last thing you're focused on is your people because you're so stressed out about everything else. But that's when you have to double down and just really love on your people and spend more time with them. In fact, actually, probably right at the beginning of COVID, the position that I was in, we had to pivot because we did face to face sales. And obviously that was not happening anymore. So we had to pivot and do over Zoom sales. And the people that I had working for me were not, they were entry level salespeople. And when you're an entry level salesperson, transitioning out of something that you're comfortable with to like talking to your friends and family instead of strangers is very difficult. And so they weren't doing well. We went from being the number one team in the company to probably like the number 10 team. There was like 20 teams. So we were
Mhm.
about halfway through. So like what I could have easily done is said, what's wrong with you guys? Like obviously I was, stressed out because COVID was going on. My husband works at the hospital. So I was like, there was that layer of, oh my God, we don't know what's going on, what's happening. And then obviously this turnaround so quickly of going from face-to-face interactions to over Zoom interactions. I had so many moving pieces, and then my paycheck was being directly affected as well because they weren't performing at the level that they had been. I could have easily like gotten upset and said, forget this. Like I'm not going to spend time with my people. But instead, I spent time on the phone with them, talking to them, finding out, hey, how are you? Tell me what's going on. Tell me how you're feeling about things. How is this transition for you? How can I support you? And what happened is naturally I had people fall off. It's going to happen during a transition like that. Change management is not easy. But the people who stuck around as long as they possibly could to the very bitter end of whatever they had going on. They gave their all because they knew that I had their back, that I cared, and that I was going to be there to support them. And so I think that when you are in that position where you're like, I am so stressed out, I just can't do this, like I've got so much going on, my turnover is terrible. That's when you just have to really lean in even further and let your people know that you're there and that you're going to be beside them, that you're going to do everything you can to support them.
That's awesome. There's a lot of parallels that I can kind of pull from my own experience there around. First and foremost, I feel like what's rang true for me, especially during COVID and times like COVID. I'm not sure that if we've experienced like times like COVID, but times where there's been a lot of suffering and pain going on, or a lot of doubt and things like that. And one of the sayings that I love is that all suffering stems from focus on the self. And
Mm,
when you're suffering through something, sounds like what the scenario you're talking about, you're worried about, I'm worried about my numbers. I'm worried about, my team. I'm worried about my position in the company, my impact on the company's growth or lack thereof. And what you suggested makes a lot of sense. It's like, it's not just about me, but I've got this group of people that can help to solve the problem. So if I focus on them and I give them the attention that they need, and I give them the love that they need and the focus that they need, then it's not just up to me to solve this problem. Together, maybe we can solve that problem. Um, so that's fantastic. First of all, and I lost my train of thought. So, I mean, that was the one thing that just kept kind of coming up as you're talking about. That was, instead of worrying about your numbers, it's really our numbers, right? If you've got a team of people,
yeah.
and it's up to you to help to rally the troops to get there. So that's amazing. And I do want to dig a little bit into your experiences in your history as a boss who was more of the what's wrong with these people. I'm going to focus in on, what's going wrong, to like how you transitioned into more of a leader instead of somebody who I would say wants to be in charge. Right.
Yep.
But let's flip it for a little bit and over to the employee side, because not everybody has the benefit of having a leader that either A, cares about them or that they know cares about them, because a lot of times leaders do care about their people to some degree, and it's just not expressed that well. I read somewhere that 80% of leaders believe that they give timely feedback, and only 20% of employees believe that they receive timely feedback.
Mm.
So that's not the 80-20 principle. That is not Pareto's law for everybody who's unaware. That is definitely a big problem. But for those employees who, again, this podcast is for people who maybe aren't entrepreneurs. Maybe they're not independent, freelancing people. Maybe they do have a boss or multiple bosses, and they want to feel cared about and like their work is valued and like they're valued. What are some things that they could do, whether that's mindset shift, whether that's actions they could take? What are some things that they could do to maybe spark or explore a better relationship with their leadership?
That's a great question. So there's a couple different things that someone can do. And I think the key to all of this, the overarching theme of this is going to be communication, right? If you are unhappy, if you feel like you're not getting what you need from your superiors, it's like you're not getting what you need from your work, if you feel like you're overburdened and you have too much on your plate, you have to communicate it, right? So bosses are not mind readers, leaders are not mind readers, managers are not mind readers. We try our best as leaders to, and yeah, we try our best as leaders to do our best, right? To be that support system for our teams. But at the end of the day, we miss things, right?
Yep.
I miss things all of the time as much as I tried to build a culture of inclusivity. Go for it.
No. So I was raising my hand about missing things. For
Yeah.
those who aren't watching the video, I probably missed 25 clues today in various one-on-one meetings with people who report to me or our peers. I probably picked up on 1/10 of the signals that were put out there that could dive deeper. So
Yeah.
just not to interrupt the stream of thought you had there, because I'm sure it was fantastic and I just totally botched it there. But I hope that people who are in an individual contributor role understand that your management, your leaders, I don't care what kind of front they're putting on, they're still human. And most of us are still learning these things as we go along. I've been in leadership positions for a very long time, and I still feel like I've got imposter syndrome sometimes. So understand that these folks are human. Sorry, continue. So reaching out, expressing the feelings that something is missing. Continue.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what actually a really great point you just made. Yeah, we as leaders, we are humans, and we do miss things all of the time. Like I cannot tell you how many times I've had someone walk into my office and say, "Hey, I'm feeling really overwhelmed," and I like think back on it, and I'm like, "Oh man, there was like 4 or 5 different like cues that you gave me that you were overwhelmed that I should have picked up on, but I totally missed it." But that's the problem, right? So like we don't communicate as human beings. We just don't communicate until we get to a breaking point sometimes. It's very common. Like we get to this point where we're just overburdened, stressed out, feeling bad. We hold it all in and then either A, we explode, or B, like we shut down. There's that's the two options we got. We explode or we shut down. So communicating with your leader is really important and telling them, hey, I am feeling overwhelmed. I am feeling overburdened. I need more feedback. Could you tell me how I'm doing on this? I can guarantee you walk into your leader's office and say, hey, I want to do the best job that I can do. Help me grow, help me understand. There's nothing more that I loved as a leader than having somebody walk in my office and say, hey, I want to do better. Help me. That was all I wanted to do as a leader was help
Yeah.
everybody be the best they could be. That was like my bread and butter. You walked to my office, you said you wanted to grow. I was like, all right, let me give you my 20-step plan. Let's go. Here we go. Here's a checklist. We're going to make it happen.
You want my advice? This
That's
the
valuable.
sky opens up, the clouds part, the sun comes out. No, it's so true. It's like, you want my help and you want to be the best you can be. Like, yeah, it maybe just for you and I, maybe just for some leadership nerds, but I'm pretty sure most people in a leadership position, somebody comes to you and says, I want to do the best job I can. I'm like, awesome. That means you're in for the long haul. You're committed. You're willing to take advice. You're willing to change. You're willing to open up. You're willing to try something new. Like there's nothing more than at least for a creative person like myself or a problem solver like myself, that I would love. So you're absolutely 100% spot on there. Um, so going to your manager and saying, I want to do the best job I can do. Can you give me feedback? Can you let me know where I could use some improvement? What are some other things, either outside of that or in addition, like following up on that, that you could do?
Yeah, if you don't have regular one-on-ones with your manager, ask for them. So one-on-one, if you're not familiar with the term, is time where you walk into your leader's office or you guys get on a Zoom call or whatever it may be, and you guys talk about your performance together. So when I ran one-on-ones with my team, I always told them, I set the expectation up front. This is your time. I'm going to come and bring things for you, but I want you to kick off this meeting. I want you to tell me what you need. I want you to communicate with me how I can better serve you. And then at the end, once we've gotten through all of your stuff, I'll go over my stuff that I have. But asking your leader for that one-on-one time, if it's once a week, if it's once every 2 weeks, if it's once a month, depending on how busy your schedule is, how busy your leader's schedule is, and what you feel like you need, you've got to communicate that to them. So ask for that one-on-one time. Now, there's another side to this, right? So if you've got a leader who is unwilling to, like, if you've walked into your leader's office and said, hey, I really could use some help, I could use some feedback, you've given them specific things that you need, and they're not responding to that, then we've got a different situation. Maybe that's where we've got to pull in another leader that you trust, a mentor, maybe HR, something like that. Of course, hopefully we never get to that place, but communication is key. Because like I said, your leader's not a mind reader, and they want to hear from you.
Yeah. Well, and they're not a mind reader. And this is one of the things that I don't ever expect any pity or sympathy from people. But as leaders, we have a billion things on our mind as well. And sometimes, again, because of that, we're not aware of a particular team member's problem, or we're not equipped or in the right headspace to be able to help. So I think that's really, really valuable to. Sometimes it's not all malice, right? It's not all malicious. Sometimes the person just is low on time. So it sounds like you're recommending there, if you go to your leader and they're not as receptive or willing to help you out, or they don't have the time, maybe they brush you off eloquently or not eloquently. Maybe they're like, oh, I'd love to help you, but I don't really think that I can do that. Or they're just like, ain't nobody got time for that. You could ask them, is there somebody who you could pair me with who might be able to mentor me?
Yeah.
Or some other things.
Yeah, look for somebody, around you on your team, that maybe is doing what you're wanting to do. So something that I used to do as an employee was, and this is actually how I got good at sales, was I asked to be sat next to the person who was number one in the company. I was like, I want to learn from that person, whatever they're doing. I want to sit right next to them, and I want to learn everything that they know. And so asking, if your leader doesn't have the time, because sometimes we really truly don't have the time, just asking for assistance in any way that they can get it to you. So asking for that mentor. And then if they're unwilling to do that, looking for a mentor on your own, someone that you trust, that you can work with, that will help you get to where you want to go.
Yeah. And that touches on something that I would love to dive into a little bit further, but I think we might be able to sum it up in that your career growth and your performance at a particular company, which ideally influences your security in that company, is it's up to you. That's within your control. You talk a little bit about, because you've worked with a number of people who, as a coach, you've worked with people who have worked for you previously.
Yep.
As you being their manager. Can you talk a little bit about personal responsibility and accountability for your career, and why that is important for anybody who wants to actually achieve more success and fulfillment, and why that's not just up to whatever their boss says about their career growth?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so this is a great example. So COVID, right? And I hate to go back to COVID, but everybody, like, we've just been through it. Stability does not come in having like a job title or a 9 to 5 or anything like that. Stability comes in creating it for yourself, right? So leveling up your skills, leveling up your resume, like learning as much as you possibly can, connecting yourself with people. Like that's where that stability comes from. And so during COVID, when people started losing their jobs, some people not everybody, but some people were like, woe is me. Like, everybody's out to get me. Like, I'm screwed. I'm going to sit and be sad. And like, this is just what happened. Right. But then some other people were like, you know what? I'm going to go. I'm going to find a new job. I'm going to take a class. I'm going to do whatever I can. In fact, it's so crazy. I had this employee who, when we got laid off, decided to go back to school to be a physical therapist. Like, she could have very easily said, I, live on my own. I don't have any money. I don't have an income now. Like, things are so hard. But instead, she was like, you know what? I'm going to make the most of this time. And that's why personal accountability is so important, because when things hit the fan, you have to be able to pick yourself back up. You have to be able to articulate why you're good at something. You have to be able to stand on your own 2 feet, and your resume has to speak for itself. Your boss does not have the capacity or the time to do everything for you, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and as much as they may want to help you as much as they can, they can't make you come ask for that help, right? Your leader doesn't know that you need help until you tell them that you need help, right? They don't know that you have too much to do until you communicate that with them. So having that personal accountability to say, okay, I'm committed to my growth. I'm committed to whatever I need to do to make the most out of where I am right now, to make the connections that I need to make, to learn what I can learn from here and then move forward. That's crucial. If you want to move up, if you want to become a manager, like it's not just going to fall at your feet, right? If you want to be CEO one day, that's not, people don't just fall into that, right? Like, maybe some people do, and if they do, holler at your girl. I want to know how you got a CEO job, stumbled, like, hey, now I'm CEO of
Yeah.
the company, or hey, now
I'm not sure that's such a amazing opportunity all the time either, though.
that is so true. That is very. I would not want to be the CEO of Robinhood, for example, right now.
No, I saw their Super Bowl commercial last night. I'm like, I'm really glad I pulled all of my funds out of. No, never mind. We're off topic.
I did the same thing. So
But regardless,
regardless,
you're right. You make your opportunities, right? Even when they do fall at your feet. And I'm gonna riff a little bit just on my own experience, because there's so much there that I love, and I think that others could relate to. I've mentioned on the podcast before that I've gotten the majority of the jobs that I've ever had through connections, intentionally or otherwise. I got my first full-time job after college because I interviewed for a job I wasn't qualified for at all. A friend put me up for the interview. I basically bombed the interview, but I was nice. And the guy who interviewed me met with somebody a couple of months later, a couple of weeks later, who needed a programmer. That guy hired me eventually. I got my next job from the woman who trained me for that job, right? Like, creating good relationships, cultivating those relationships, and showing up with a growth mindset can have those things kind of fall at your feet, or they're there whenever you do reach out for them. So I think that's really, really important. A lot of common threads in some of the conversations I've had lately around connecting with people, but not transactionally.
right. So 2 pieces to this that I love. For one, I love that you were talking about how you didn't have the qualifications for it. I cannot tell you how many times I applied for a job that said that I had to have a bachelor's degree. I didn't have a bachelor's degree, but I knew somebody, and or my work stood for itself because people knew people that I knew, and they saw, like, or they asked around, right? So that's a big piece. But you make your own opportunities, right? So if you want a job and the job is not there, or the job isn't created, do the job, and then
Yes.
somebody will notice that you're filling that hole, and maybe you're creating your own job. You're creating your dream job. I had a client that I was working with who was helping. This is the coolest story. So she was helping a company who makes, I don't want to get too far into details, but they make trucks, right? And these trucks are autonomous, and these autonomous trucks go into mines and they do engineering things.
Okay, so first of all, you yada yada the engineering things, but I'll let that go because it sounds awesome. Autonomous trucks go into mines and superhero movie commences. Please continue.
Exactly. Captain America. So Anyways, so they reached out to her. She's an engineer. They were reaching out to her on LinkedIn and they were asking her random questions like about engineering because they're not engineers. They just own the company. So they were asking her for advice about like, how do we talk to engineers, stuff like that. And I was like, okay, so they're reaching out to you. You guys have had a relationship for about a year. You're giving them free advice. What are you getting from this? And she's like, I really like doing it. I'm like, cool. So why can't that be your full-time job? And she's like, well, I don't know why it couldn't be my full-time job. I'm like, cool. So let's write a job description of what you're doing for them. Next time you have a meeting with them, I want you to ask them to review this job description with you via Zoom, ask them if they agree to it, and then ask them for this job. And you're going to ask them for however much money you want. And she was, okay, cool. And so she did. And they said yes. And now she's like working her dream job because that's what she did. She asked for it, right?
And she created it.
She created it. She created the opportunity. Opportunity is all around you if you take the ownership and the leadership and you look for it, right? So if you're in your job, you're an employee and you're not, you're not getting what you need, you're not growing, you're not necessarily thrilled about your role, look for the opportunity around you because it really is all around you and you can create that.
Yeah. And what I'm about to say may seem like I'm being a bit of a wet blanket, and I don't mean to be at all.
But blanket me.
Opportunity is absolutely all around you. And I feel like in that situation with the client that you talked about, she probably got almost as excited creating the job description, thinking about like what that job could be, pitching that idea to them. And even if they hadn't accepted it, she took her shot. And yes, she might have been hurt. She might have been disappointed. She might have been devastated. She might have been, but thinking about the possibility of that job, even if they hadn't accepted it, somebody else might have.
Exactly. It gave her confidence. That's the thing. And it was so cool to watch her grow over this like couple month period where we were working through this. Like, because she would get scared and she's like, oh, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can do it. I'm like, no, remember, you have the control here because you've shown the value that you bring because you've shown up, you've done the work, you've proven your value. So go in and be confident. And yeah, even I swear if they had said no, she still would have been just as excited because she went into that meeting so fired up, so passionate, so happy about what she had already done that it didn't matter. It wasn't even about the job at that point. It was about her owning her worth and her value and going for it.
Yeah. The key word there being value, right? Like so in my business, I work with employers who are generally the gatekeepers on hiring. And I try to get them to remove things like you need a college degree for this. You need a bachelor's. You need 7 years of experience, not 6, 7, because 7 is the magic number, whatever. Anyway, I love you, employers. Stay strong. But I always get them to focus on what is the value that this position is going to provide to your organization and how is it going to provide that? What are the outputs going to be? And I think that, in coaching individuals, and I don't do this professionally, I do it as an amateur when people ask me for career advice, I always tell them to focus on what value did you provide to the organization and to its customers or clients or vendors or partners or what have you. Don't just say, I helped with this project. Like, what did you do? What did you help to do? How did you coordinate? How did you help delivery of this thing? And what was the value that it delivered? Maybe it delivered, $30 million of value to some client or some customer. Maybe it saved them a ton of time. Like, that is what companies care about, both in resumes and in what it sounds like you're talking about, where once she presented her value, this client of yours, it's almost impossible for them to say no. Maybe they would have said no, but they realized the value she provided and they probably were caught off guard. Not that you should be adversarial, but they were like, shit, if she leaves, we're not getting that value anymore. Write a check.
Yeah. And so it's like, it's so many things I could talk about here because we could talk about hiring on the manager side, but as the employee, like your resume, it's got to be transformational, not transactional. Right. So it's not about like what your job description is at your job. I all the time see resumes and I know that
I too fall asleep to those. Yes.
Yeah. But they copy and paste their job description or they like reword it, whatever. And that's not what makes a difference. That's not who you are. Who you are is the time that you showed up and you had a really great idea and you saved the company like $30,000, or that time that you worked overtime to help get that project to the finish and what that did for the organization. That's the value that you bring, not what you do in the day to day, the minutia of your job. So yeah, no, I totally agree. It's all about like the value you bring and the transformation that you make as an employee.
Yeah. So part of that is it's like empathy. Maybe it's empathy. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But putting yourself in the employer's shoes, if you're the potential job seeker or the person who's looking for a promotion, like what do they need? And if you don't know, ask them. And they may not know either, by the way. What do you need out of this thing that I'm doing that's providing you value? They might be like, for you to keep doing it. But
Yeah, or
to understand the value you provide.
yeah, or where is the gap, right? So like walking into your boss's office, where are we not succeeding? Where are we struggling? Where is that gap? Do you know how we close it? And if not, start brainstorming ideas of what you think of how like you guys could close that gap, right? So like that's again where that communication comes into play. Is like your leader again is a human and they've got a million things on their plate and a million things that they're worried about. So if you see something where there's a gap and you can fill it, go for it.
Yeah. I have to say, as a fairly long time manager, having somebody who is on my team works for me. I hate the word even works for me. I hate that phrase. We all work together. But so having somebody on my team volunteer to solve a problem that I have with a full understanding of the problem and with it not detracting from the work that they're already doing, I will quietly sob tears of joy in private when somebody does that, because it's a problem that I no longer have to solve.
Right, exactly. You're like saving my day. I have this, and I love her. Her name's Olivia. She worked for me. She won't care that I called her out, but she actually ended up being my assistant manager because she would show up and she'd say, "Hey, I noticed XYZ about our equipment, or I noticed this or that, and I have this idea. What do you think?" And she would lay out the entire like solution to this problem to me and say, "Are you okay if I go ahead and do this?" And I'm like, "God, yes, please do it. That's such a great idea. I had no idea." Like, and so like, because she kept doing that and she kept showing up and showing me value and not asking for anything, when I needed an assistant manager, the first person that popped in my head was Olivia, because she's the one who was doing all those things. And that doesn't mean that you have to do all the things in order to be like, in order to earn your place in the world.
And you won't always get noticed, right?
Right. You won't always get noticed. But if you show up, you act in integrity, at the end of the day, you walk away from your job and you know that you did everything that you could do and you feel good about your work, then hey, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have a similar experience from my career where I joined a company as an individual contributor at a senior level, took on manager responsibilities, team lead responsibilities, helped to formalize some of the leadership roles and those descriptions and things like that. And about the time that I felt like I was being overlooked for a promotion or there wasn't one available for me, I thought I was hitting the glass ceiling. I started looking elsewhere. When the executive position opened up, I was on the short list of like 2 people.
That's a real short list.
Well, they'd interviewed other people, unbeknownst to me. I'd been interviewing these people for what I thought was a manager role, but they had been secretly kind of interviewing these people for a replacement for this executive level role. And they didn't interview anybody who they thought could do the job to the degree that they thought I could. And I got to say, for anybody who's an employee at a company, if you feel valued at all by your manager, by their manager, by your peers, hiring managers, and I'm sure you'll back me up on this, feel free to disagree. We're here to minimize risk when it comes to hiring a new position. And in your example, the story you gave, if you're hiring an assistant manager, you're going to go with a known quantity.
Oh, yeah.
If you can, immediately over bringing in somebody from the outside. Not just because somebody from the outside couldn't do it or anything like that, but like because you know this person, you've worked with this person, you know they'll go above and beyond. So that's not to say that you'll automatically get that promotion, but it will show folks that if they need to bring somebody up to the next level, that it could be you just because you've taken that initiative. Plus, what else are you doing with your time?
Exactly. Well, and I think, yeah, I totally agree. I think that, there's that risk management piece of it is that I don't want to hire somebody from the outside when I'm hiring, because of the fact that I don't know this person's work ethic. I don't know, like I've done so many interviews and people show up and they are one way and you think like, guys, I've been hiring for 15 years. I make bad hiring choices still to this day for my own business because you think that one person is one way, you do a couple interviews, you think you have a good feel, and then someone doesn't turn out. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're an employee and you feel like you're not being seen and not being valued, just know if your manager tells you you're doing a good job, they notice you and there is opportunity for you even if you can't see it.
Yeah, sometimes you have to just ask for it, right? Like I'm willing to take on more responsibilities. What does that look like? I would even go as far as to suggest if you're, let's say, on a sales team and you want to jump into some management or leadership responsibilities to say, I would love to take on these extra responsibilities. I realize that may detract from my sales job. How can we deal with that? Like if you have contingency plans kind of in place and you're thinking forward, again, as a manager, I love when people are thinking that way because it's fewer problems that I have to solve. And despite, I think, as good of a leader as Mindy has become, and I feel like I'm passable at this point, we are never able to think of all of the problems that we need to solve. We're just constantly still going to be in kind of firefighting mode, even when we're trying not to be in firefighting mode. So the more problems that other people solve for us, the better off we all are.
Oh, 100%. That firefighting mode, every time somebody says firefighting mode, I just think of all my problems in the water hose and I'm like, all out.
I asked, at an old job, I asked the corporate office for business cards that said juggling firefighter as my title. They would not print them.
Just print your own, man. Print your own. I would love to see you in the full fireman gear, like just like the smudge on your face of like the battle you've done as a leader.
While juggling chainsaws that are on fire.
100%.
Well, and again, that's not what we want to do. Most of the time we want to get out there and solve strategic problems.
Right.
But there are all these other things going on. So if you, and this is one of the threads of thought that was racing through my mind, my busy mind earlier, as you were articulating so beautifully this relationship between manager and managee, is I don't even know how to necessarily articulate this, but so many times people will come to you just wanting something. And that's not to say that it's not a valid thing, but I've had people come to me and say that they wanted a raise because they wanted to buy a house. And maybe I was raised a little old school, but there's a part of me that wanted to laugh and be like, so? Like, you want to raise because you want to buy a house? I can't, like, not because I don't care about you buying a house, but like literally as a representative of company leadership, I can't just give you a raise because you want more money.
Right.
But if you come to me and say, I would love to take on this responsibility and I would love to solve this problem, or I see that this is a problem and I would love to help you out with that. And whether you ask for a raise for that or you just say, I want to help with that now, like I see the value you want to provide. You're building your stock as a contributor to the company. And when push comes to shove, I know that I've gone to bat for people a million times when somebody said, hey, this person makes like 30% higher than our average person. I'm like, yeah, and they're worth twice as much.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I will fight tooth and nail for somebody who is bringing the value to get them what they deserve. Right. A lot of times what happens is employers, as much as they try, don't have the market research that they need on what the role that their employees are in is worth. So sometimes you do have to just kind of fight for that for your people. But I think you bring a good point is like, if you do need a raise, like if you feel like you need a raise, then I highly suggest that you go with the value that you're bringing. For one, go prepared. Don't go in for a fight, but go in and let
right.
And say, hey, listen, I'm buying a house. I was doing some research. I noticed that the role that I'm in pays about 20% less than what the market average is. I would love to talk to you about how we get me from where I am right now to closer to that market average. And here's the value that I've brought in the last year.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you, if someone brought that to me and they said those words to me, I would be like, oh, that's a great point. Let's talk through that. And if I can't do anything, I'm going to explain to you why I can't do anything for
Yeah.
work. But I'm going to listen to you because you've brought me information. You've taken that personal accountability and responsibility, and you know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, you've taken ownership and not just been beholden to what the company's willing to offer you, but you've done it in a polite way,
Right.
not in a confrontational way. And this is like this whole, we could probably have an entire series of podcast episodes on mindset around things like money,
Oh,
and salary and pay and things like that. But negotiating a salary doesn't have to be a battle.
it shouldn't be.
No, it should be like a mutually beneficial conversation about compensation. And I'm going to show a little bit of my hand as an employer here to those of you who are individual contributors. Maybe you don't have to deal with payroll or managing employee salaries and all those fun things. Most companies don't even realize necessarily that it's way more expensive to replace somebody than it is to keep somebody.
Yep.
And that doesn't mean that you go out there with ridiculous demands and you hold your company hostage. Again, not combative. Don't be combative. But to your point, Mindy, is show the value you provide. And even the most cold-hearted boss will eventually have a feeling show up, and they'll appreciate, what you've actually helped them to do or helped the company to do. And they might be like, we can give them that extra 5% because I don't want to have to go out there and hire some new, unknown off the street.
It's that selfish feeling. It's that tiny little selfish feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But no, that's a good point too. Like, and this just kind of like a side note, like if you are offered a job, so like let's say you're a job seeker and you are offered a job, I'm going to show my hand as a prior employer. When you are offered a job, they are going to offer you more than likely the lowest that they are willing to pay for that role, or somewhere around the lowest, whatever they can get you in at the lowest is. So if you are not negotiating salary when you are getting a job offer, you are leaving money on the table. Do not do that. Do not be ridiculous. As Sean said, look at the market, see what the market's paying, and go back and negotiate in a polite manner. But I can guarantee you, when you get a job offer, it is definitely of the lower of what they're willing to pay.
I mean, I could definitely see that in corporate America, to be sure.
Yeah.
I will slightly disagree with you just from my own experiences as a hiring manager. But again, I might be the anomaly. I work in organizations where I'm managing less than 100 people. I'm going to make the offer a lot of times where it's like, I want to do the least amount of negotiating and I'm sick of interviewing people and this person's the one, and I'm going to bring them on to what I think that they're worth. And that might be, 20%, 30% above what the minimum is. But I also know that they're going to accept it more than likely. And if they negotiate up, I know what my range is.
Yeah. And
at least, yeah, go ahead.
I think that speaks to the culture of and this is another conversation we could have, the culture of the company that you're working for, you apply for. Because if you apply for, and I'm not saying that every single company is like this, so make sure you take this with a grain of salt, right? Like large organizations, for the most part, hiring managers may or may not have as much control as they want, right?
It's true. Very true.
Offer whatever HR says that they're allowed to offer. So that's a reason why corporate culture is so important when you are looking for a job, looking at the culture of the organization you're going into. Like, are you going to an organization that's going to pay you or try to pay you the least amount of money that they can?
Yeah.
You're going somewhere where they're going to value you.
Penny wise, pound foolish is the way I describe that. I've been in those situations where I'm recalling back to having it wasn't even that hard of a process to go through, but it's like, I want to make an offer to this candidate. And I had to send it to the head of HR, the head of HR's boss, somebody in accounting, the CFO, my boss and his boss, I think. I don't even remember at that point in time. And I'd be like, I want to offer this person, I want to pay them $122,000 for this senior engineer role. And like somebody not unqualified, but maybe somebody who didn't have the engineering qualifications or didn't have the market research, like, can we do 118? And I'm like, are you serious?
We're arguing over pennies.
We're going to argue over like $300 a month after taxes, or we could keep interviewing for this role if that person doesn't accept, which is going to cost us another $4,000 a week in lost productivity.
Yeah, your time. Exactly. Oh my gosh. Like you're the same language. Like I don't want, as a hiring manager, I don't want to waste my time because time is money, baby.
Yeah. And again, going back to, I've had these conversations. I've had contractors who make almost double what, before taxes and everything, what some of my W-2 employees would make. And people would constantly come to me who weren't in that discipline and say, is this person worth that much? I'm like, no, they're worth more.
Yeah.
So know your value. Sorry, we went off a bit of a rant and a tangent here. Know your value. Know the value you provide. Be able to put it into words. And do you have suggestions on how to, because I know it can be tough. Sometimes you want to be humble, rightfully so. Do you have suggestions on how somebody might describe the value they provide to an organization? Do you have an example you can give or something like that?
That's a good question. I think there's two pieces to this. So the first thing is you need to, each thing that you accomplish, you need to write it down and keep it somewhere. So I have a Word document that has traveled with me and it's saved in like 4 different places and now it's on Google Drive. But I have this document and it details times where I have made an impact on the organization. And you may think, Mindy, oh my God, like, what is this, your brag sheet? Yeah, it is my brag sheet because at the end of the day, the person that's going to cheer the loudest for you is you. You have to be your own personal cheerleader. And it's not, cocky or braggadocious to go and say, hey, this is what value I've brought to the organization because you've got to take emotion out of it. It's got to be factual, right? Like these are the facts. This is what I've done. And if you go in and you're honest and you've done honest work, then you have no reason to feel weird or awkward. And that's not to say that you won't. Maybe a little bit of practice in a mirror, practice on your friend, call mom, whoever it is, and say, hey, I'm going to this interview. I'm going to talk to this person about a raise. I need to go talk to my boss. Let me spit out what I want to say. Get comfortable with it. Get comfortable with talking about your accomplishments. And then go in knowing that you've already done this work. You've already done a good job. And you're just going to highlight it.
Yeah. I love that advice. Don't make the first time you talk about your value, the first time that you go and talk with your bosses or talk with your superiors or whoever about your value. It can be daunting. And that's a good sales lesson, right? You know this from your sales days. Like you practice your script, you practice dealing with objections, you practice all those things. So a little bit of sales secrets here on the Rebase podcast. Never practice or never deliver your script the first time live to a customer.
Never. We used to, so it's so funny. When I used to have my field sales team, we would set up at events, and when we got to the event, I would make my team pitch to me first before anybody came up to them because I was like, your first pitch, no matter how many times you've ever done it, is your worst pitch. So get it out, get the awkward out, get your wiggles, get your shakes out, and let's go. That's sales secret number 1, to never make your pitch your first pitch.
Yeah. And despite what you might think, and I used to believe as an engineer, sales was a 4-letter word and it was like the most dirty thing ever. And should never sell anybody on anything. Like I used to honestly believe I built a thing. The thing is good. People will buy the thing. You have to be able to sell yourself in developing your career, whether that's a promotion, whether that's just taking on extra responsibility, whether that is getting a new job. So I know we're about out of time here and I've monopolized enough of your time already here. Mindy, I got to ask, for our wonderful viewing audience here, what are some final nuggets of wisdom on improving their current station in life, where they are with their current boss, or if that's determining whether they need to leave and go to another job? What's on your mind right now for advice that you would give to the pandemic adjusted reality that everybody's dealing with right now?
So the first thing, just kind of to spiff off what you were just talking about, is being passionate about your growth, your success, and yourself. Life is a sale, guys. Sales is, they say it's a 4-letter dirty word, nasty word, but think about anytime you're passionate about something. When you go tell your friend that you have to go eat at Taco Bell and eat the nacho fries because they're the best thing you've ever had in your life, you're making a sale. When you get on your Instagram and you talk about that band that you just went and saw and you're like, you guys have got to go buy their album, you're making a sale. It doesn't feel that way because you're passionate about it. And you're like, everybody needs to love this thing I love. Take that love that you have for all those things, apply it to yourself, and be passionate about you, right? So sell yourself. It is not dirty. It is not bad. Be passionate about your success and your growth, and that will solve a bunch of problems for you. My last thing that I will say to you is if you are feeling, like you're struggling, if you're stressed out, if things aren't going the way you want to at work, go talk to someone about it. If you can't talk to your superior, talk to a friend. Can't talk to a friend, find a coach. Can't find a coach, find a therapist. Talk to somebody, get some help. Don't hold on to that stuff because there is something that you can do about your situation always. Again, if you're passionate about yourself, you care about yourself, everything else will follow.
Wow. I almost feel bad just even chiming in here, and you'll hear my voice after that as a close to this episode, which was epic. I may just edit this out. I don't even know. I'll just edit myself out and be like, that's the end of the episode. Wow, thank you so much, Mindy, for joining us today and talking with us about such an important topic. Where can folks connect with you, find out more about what it is that you're doing, maybe hire you as a coach or just get involved in your world?
Yeah, absolutely. I am on Instagram is at Mindy Mercurio. So Instagram.com/Mindy Mercurio. You can also go to MindyMercurio.com. I'm going to spell my last name for you because it is complicated. It is MERCURIO. So find me on Instagram if you love food, if you love personal growth, if you love Disney, if you love dogs, if you just love Instagram, come hang out with me.
Hold on. I'm going to go find all those things right now. Well, thank you so much, Mindy, for joining us today on the Rebase Show. And I can't wait to speak again and have you back on the podcast because I'm sure we have so much more we could cover.
Yeah.
So thank you again. And until next time on the show for Profession with Purpose, Rebase, this is your host, Sean, signing off. Cheers. Hey, it's Sean again. I know you thought that was the end of the episode, but just when you thought you were out, we pulled you back in. Just for a minute though, with a few final reminders as we wrap up our time today. First, if you haven't already subscribed, what are you waiting for? By subscribing to the show, you'll get access to every amazing conversation and solo episode in the archives. Everything from the future of work, to going into the business of you, to dealing with stress when you're feeling overwhelmed, and you'll automatically get every new episode right when it gets released. And I don't need to tell you how to do this because you're a podcast listener and you're listening to this show, so you're obviously awesome. Now, if you are enjoying the show, then all I want for Christmas is your 5-star rating and review. And I've made it even easier for you to do so. Just tap the link in the show notes or go to ratethispodcast.com/rebase. Now, every new rating and review makes me feel like the popular girl in school. But more importantly, the podcasts with great reviews are the ones that get featured on podcast platforms. So more people will discover the show and we can continue to grow this movement of Profession with Purpose. And last but not least, if you enjoyed this episode, and if you're not driving right now or flying a helicopter or performing life or death surgery, then please screenshot the episode and tag me on Instagram at RebaseHQ. Doing just one of these things will absolutely make my day. If you do all three, well, let's just say I'll owe you a huge hug and a high five the next time I see you. I sincerely appreciate each and every one of you who's tuning into the show every week and who's joined the Profession with Purpose movement. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.